It is very common among teenagers to use different intoxicants to play with their brain and change their mindset temporarily. Ever since I was a kid, adults have always seemed to discourage the use of drugs and alcohol, but I've always wanted to find out more about these substances from a science perspective. That's why I chose this topic. For this project, I've chosen 2 of the most common substances used among teenagers. The brain is the command center and processor responsible for controlling things like body temperature, blood pressure, heart rate, and it accepts lots of information about the world around us from our various senses. It also takes care of physical movement and lets us think, dream, reason, and experience emotion. Here are the parts of the brain that are affected by alcohol: the prefrontal cortex, the temporal, frontal, and parietal lobe, hippocampus, the cerebellum, and the brainstem. Alcohol tends to give us a good feeling after it's consumed. This is because the ethanol in alcoholic beverages triggered the release of dopamine in the brain's reward center. The reward center is the same part of the brain that is affected by all pleasurable activity like eating or hanging out with friends. By jacking up the dopamine levels, we feel great even though there really isn't any pleasurable activity going on. Alcohol acts on the nerve cells of the brain and disrupts the communication between them and other cells in the body. Alcohol does this by altering the actions of 2 major neurotransmitters in the brain. Alcohol suppresses the activities of certain nerve pathways, eventually making a person appear sluggish and slow-moving. Over time, with constant drinking, the brain has the ability to become desensitized to the alcohol, which makes us less emotionally impacted by it. A teenager's brain is still undergoing construction and developing until approximately age 25. Drinking will affect the development process by damaging mainly the prefrontal cortex and the cerebellum. This is detrimental and can cause serious long-term effects like nerve damage, brain shrinkage, and terrible memory. Up to 80% of alcoholics have a deficiency in thiamine 15, which develops into an illness. Symptoms of this illness include mental confusion, paralysis, and eye-controlling nerves, and difficulty with muscle coordination. Apart from the brain damage, alcohol also damages other parts of the body like the stomach, esophagus, small intestine, kidney, and the liver. The stomach, esophagus, and small intestine all have a lining which can get damaged from alcohol, but the intestines can lose the ability to process nutrients properly. The kidney's purpose is to filter harmful substances from blood, but the heavy alcohol will damage it and make it unable to do so. The liver's purpose is to make substances for us like bile and other chemicals. Alcohol will make the liver start to deteriorate and won't do its job as it should. Drinking more than 4 to 5 drinks within a span of 2 hours can raise a person's blood alcohol to dangerous levels. This can cause a sudden drop in kidney function known as acute kidney injury. When this happens, dialysis is needed until a person's kidney function returns to normal. Acute kidney injury usually goes away in time, but in some cases it can lead to long-lasting kidney damage. A common party drug that is easily accessible at a low cost is marijuana, also known as pot. Pot is commonly thought of to be a harmless drug, which is partially true. However, scientific evidence points to the direction that pot is not good for teens. Neurodevelopment is particularly active during childhood and adolescence and continues until at least age 25. Heavy use of weed during that time has been linked to permanent problems with things like memory, comprehending new ideas, perception, impulse control, and other intellectual brain functions. This information is just a key takeaway from a 40-year-long study, but they still don't know if marijuana truly makes teens dumber or if dumber teens just have a higher chance to want to smoke a lot of pot. It is extremely hard for scientists to find clear-cut immediate damage to our body like with alcohol because scientific studies are extremely hard since they cannot control the variables in a person's life like they can with the rats in a lab. Early studies on rats conducted by scientists in the 1980s suggest cognitive defects linked to cannabis use may be long-term. Even after the equivalent of 9 human years without marijuana exposure, rats given marijuana extract in adolescence showed residual mental defects in learning and memory that persisted into adulthood. But rats given marijuana extract as young adults did not develop these long-lasting impairments. They also noted that cannabis receptors in the brain of humans and rodents work in very similar ways. In a 2012 report, researchers from Duke University analyzed data from the 40-year study and found that the earlier and more frequent a person smoked pot, the greater loss of intelligence by age 38. Marijuana acts in a different way than alcohol in both short-term and long-term effects. THC is the chemical in weed that gets you high and makes you feel lightheaded and relaxed. It can be eaten as an extract, smoked, or inhaled as a vapor. However way it gets in our body, it always ends up in the bloodstream, which carries it to the brain where we have special cannabinoid receptors that are responsible for pleasure, time perception, coordination, and memory. The receptors aren't in the brain specifically for weed though. They are usually activated by the chemical anandamide, which is good at generating sensations of pleasure. Anandamide is found in chocolate. THC and anandamide have very similar structure, which makes it easy to latch onto and interrupt neurotransmitters. THC comes from the marijuana plant. Curiosity usually revolves around why the marijuana plant even has THC contained within it, and the answer to that is related to evolution and survival of organisms with characteristics best suited for their environment. Many plants have defense mechanisms to protect from predators, like how cactuses and some weeds have spikes in them to protect against prey. THC is a defense mechanism for the marijuana plant against insects that eat it, which cause them to forget where they found the tasty plant and they cannot go back to get more. The marijuana plant contains another chemical called CBD. Plants with high THC levels and low CBD levels will work well to get you stoned, whereas pot with high levels of CBD and low THC will work good as medicines. Medical practices with pot has been proven effective in dealing with pain, muscle spasms, nausea with cancer patients, poor appetite, and weight loss caused by chronic disease like HIV. Many people don't know that there is a difference between medical and non-medical pot, and they assume that since cannabis is used as a medicine, it should have no harm on the body. Looking at studies along with the different types of cannabis plants tells us otherwise. In conclusion, pot isn't a deadly drug, but it still has its effects and should be used with caution. Alcohol, however, should be avoided at all costs for people of all ages, especially teenagers.